Hey guys, it's Matt here from Scoop in Response. Today I wanted to do something a little different from my usual videos. Wanted to sort of try a bit of a vloggy style approach to a new card that has been released or at least spoiled. It's Esika, God of the Tree, and I thought what would be cool would be to go over, I guess, some of my initial thoughts on how we could build the commander, what potentially could be included, and how the deck might actually operate. So we'll jump in and we'll have a look at the card first and foremost. So it is Esika, God of the Tree. It's a legendary creature god. Vigilance, add 1 mana of any color as a tap ability, and then other legendary creatures you control have vigilance and also have add 1 mana of any color. So essentially it's Chromatic Lantern on a dude, but for all of your creatures, so it's pretty awesome. But the most exciting part of this is that Esika actually flips into the Prismatic Bridge. So for WUBRG, you can cast it at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or a planeswalker card, put that card onto the battlefield, and the rest on the on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's a pretty busted card. So it's a dork that you can cast from the command zone, but also you can cast it for its alternate mode, which is it's back-faced in the Prismatic Bridge. So it's insane to me in terms of the multiple ways that you can build this. So there's actually 3 or 4 different ways that I have kind of thought that we could put it together right from the start. Those being God's Tribal with the new World Tree land. You could also build it as an Enchantress deck, and you can also build it as Legendaries Matter. So we might jump into my initial list, which is a bit of an amalgamation. So here we have, I've used Morophon just because we don't actually have Esika as a commander just yet in Moxfield. Great website, by the way. If you guys don't use Moxfield, I'd encourage you to check it out. It's really good as far as resources, and it's a great way to look at deck techs. So for this, it's kind of a blend between the gods and legendaries matter. So we've got Rogak, son of Rogar, which is basically a Mox as soon as you actually have your commander out, which is pretty sweet. We've got the usual dorks, obviously Arbor Elf, Birds of Paradise, Noble Hierarch. They're just too good to not include in a WUBRG deck because of the amount of fixing that you can have. But what's cool with Esika's actual text, it means that a lot of the 1 mana legendaries can then become rocks as well. So Hope of Girapa, Isamari, Anaconda, Kytheon, Avia, Reese, and Zergo. All of these are just insane. You can't use them to ramp before turn 3, but essentially it means that you can be looking at casting your commander on turn 3 or turn 2, depending on your acceleration. And then these are already going to be online if you've played them before turn 3, and you're going to have access to additional mana. So you might even be able to play your commander, and it will be free essentially because you get access to 3 additional mana because of all of the little dudes that you've been playing prior to. So one of the other cool cards that's actually been spoiled along with New Gods is the legendary land, which is the World Tree. And here we are. So we'll pull this one up as well. So the World Tree enters the battlefield tapped. Tap to add green. As long as you control 6 or more lands, you have add mana of any color. So it's just insane fixing without the next ability. Obviously, it's just an absolute staple in any WUBRG deck or 4-color or even 3-color deck that uses green. And then its final ability for double WUBRG or for Progenitus mana, however you want to say it, tap and sacrifice the World Tree, search your library for any number of god cards, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So the first thing that I sort of realized with a deck like this is if you put 20 gods and changelings into your deck, and one of them is Perforos, God of the Forge, that is 40 damage just straight up. So for those who are unfamiliar, Perforos, God of the Forge, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforos deals 2 damage to each opponent. So basically you get 20 creatures all entering at the same time. All of the gods and changelings that you fetched out and they come onto the battlefield, and it does 40 damage to all of your opponents. So it's an instant win if you can get to 10 mana, double Wooburg, and then sacrifice that. That should be an instant win for you for the most of the time. But that's a bit of a linear strategy, and I guess a lot of the gods are quite clunky. So you'll see this list that I've got up in front of us right now. There's really only the 3 and 4 mana gods for the most part. Now I'm actually pretty happy with this. I think it can be augmented with some changelings as well, and there are quite a few new changelings that have been spoiled, as well as the new Kaldheim gods, which most of I think are pretty awesome, purely because they're bimodal as well. So you've got, lots of different options. So we've got Valky, God of Lies, which is a very cool card, mostly because you can cast the Tybalt side with Bloodbraid Elf, which is just absolutely busted. Already a great card in Bloodbraid Elf. You can then just go and put a 7 CMC Planeswalker onto the battlefield. Halvar, God of Battle, I think would be an instant include, purely because you can cast it as an equipment as well. So it just seems to be great no matter what point you actually pick it up in the overall course of the game. Alrund, I'm not too sold on, purely because you'd have to devote quite a lot of devotion. You'd have to devote quite a lot of Foretold cards to actually make it, I think, reasonable. And then essentially you've got his second ability. At the beginning of your end step, choose a card type, then reveal the top 2 cards of your library. Put all cards of the chosen type in your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This can kind of work if you're looking at, I guess, a really permanent heavy and enchantment heavy deck. So you could look at essentially just running it much like some Enchantress style decks where they just run creatures, enchantments, and lands. So that could see you getting value, but I mean, a 5 mana for a 1/1, I just don't think is good enough in any commander pod. Then we've got Kolvori, God of Kinship, which is the new green rare that's been spoiled, another god. Basically, the front side is just a dude that lets you reveal legendary creature cards from the front, which is actually really good because, if you're playing a legendary creature heavy deck, you're certainly getting a lot of card selection. It's never going to sort of be too bad. But the other side of it being an artifact, which is basically like an arcane signet. As the crest enters the battlefield, we choose creature type. You could probably choose gods for this, but you could choose anything really. If there's a specific type of creature that you want to have in the deck that isn't a god, because that's fine, because you can tap to add green and spend it to cast that creature spell of the chosen type or a legendary creature type. So if you are casting gods, they're all going to be legendary anyway, so it doesn't matter if you name gods or not. You can name another creature or something like that. So another creature type rather. So if there's a particular combo piece that you want to access rather, if there's something like your Treefolk Druids, your Feyburrow Elder, your Dryad of the Elysian Grove, or Gigantha even, or Bloom Tender, all of these are really good. So maybe with a few elf targets, you've got elf as a reasonable candidate there. Obviously, Bloom Tender is just an absolutely busted card in general. So I guess that's the piece of the gods tribal. But then when we look at legendaries matter, you've got a quite neat package of cards that work really well. So we've got Rogark, Son of Rogar, Hope of Girapur, Isamaru, Hound of Konda. Geez, this is really making me work in terms of the wording today. I'm usually a player at a table that just says that guy, or I'm going to play my dude. So I'm pretty bad with names overall. Kythion's another great one. Reese the Redeemed is awesome. Avia is great. You've got a lot of sync abilities on her. So I personally love any kind of creature that does something in your deck but also has a sync. Allosaurus Rider is one of Allosaurus Shepherd, I should say, is one of those examples that I just absolutely love because it's a great piece that does something when when it actually comes in. It protects your dudes, makes things uncounterable, but then you've got that sync for those other options as well. Something that I just sort of clued onto in the process of putting this together is Imara, Soul of the Accord. So whenever she's tapped, you make a white soldier creature token with lifelink. But you don't ever really want to attack with Amara because she's just a bear and can quite easily be killed. So you can tap with her, generate a mana and a dude, and it's just absolutely insane value for what that is. Then you've got things like Cheval. I think this dude's like very underplayed. I haven't seen him getting a lot of hype, but I think a 2-mana 1/3 with as much text as he's got is pretty good. I think the only challenge is that it's a little bit too particular, but in a deck like this, where you've got a Death Touch blocker that can also, with Vigilance I might add, once your commander's out, where you've also got lots of upsides around the bounty counters that you can put on. This kind of deck could work with Proliferate as well. I'm not saying that you necessarily have to, but there are lots of counters and tokeny type things that would sort of suit with this sort of deck. So I think he's a great include, and the fact that he's not double pip of a single color I really like in a 5-color deck. You'll notice that there are quite a few of the demigods that are in the new Theros that have double pips. I think Anax is good, but the rest I just can't see being good enough. Maybe there is an argument for Daxos or Timurit, but for the most part, I just couldn't find them to be useful enough. The notable exception being Caliphate, Beloved of the Sea. It's just, I mean, for 1 and 2 blue, yeah, it's a double pip. The body is pretty good for 3, but I really like the spells your opponents cast that target this permanent cost 1 more to cast on all of your creatures and your enchantments. So that actually works really well if you want to go down an Enchantress route. So kind of just that sort of light synergy that's a bit of an added effect. So we've got things like Fibblethip. It's just a dork that's legendary that draws a card. So this is just a Elvish Visionary with strict upside, just insane upside, because you can tap it and then it will become it'll go back into the deck when it's targeted. Gaddock Teague was just a simple include. You don't really need to play a whole bunch of high CMC spells, which I think is pretty right for a permanent heavy deck like this. Jolrael is obviously great just on its own. You can time a lot of things to draw cards. There is things like Ephara, God of the Polis. That's just your second card draw each turn there. But there's a lot of ways that you can be drawing an additional card each turn and getting those cat tokens. And once again, a great card that is just insane on curve anyway. Given the fact that it can then tap for mana, I just can't see how it's not an auto include. Kinnan, Bond of Prodigy. Now, I love Kinnan. I play him in CDH. I put a deck tech out for Kinnan. I think he's just an absolutely insane dude. In this deck, he's just absolutely phenomenal because all of your dorks, all of your dudes are tapping for mana, and you can generate additional mana. So you could even go down the route of slapping a bunch of untap effects on there too. So you could put your Freed from the Real and Pemin's Aura in here. You can put Savala with your Scepter of Domination. Yep. And it's just absolutely insane. Starfield Mystic is a great card that just lets you reduce your enchantment spells by 1. Always relevant in a deck like this. A lot of your enchantment spells are going to be your legendary gods, so it just makes sense. You'll see a lot of the, as I mentioned, the 3 mana gods. I think a 3 mana god is pretty decent as a tapper as well. And a lot of these things aren't going to be online when they first start, but you should get them online reasonably quickly with the amount of devotion that you've got in this deck. Bontu obviously is fine as well. Dryad for additional fixing, also an enchantment creature and additional land drops. Heliod, obviously great card. You can use it in all kinds of different decks. In here, it's just a fantastic include as well. Kethis, another way to reduce your legendary spells, so I'm always for that. Colossus is one of my favorite cards in Modern. I just love playing decks with Colossus in him, and he just fits all of the criteria for this sort of deck. So I won't go too deep into any of the other gods, with the exception of maybe the 2 Perforos creatures. So you've obviously got your Impact Tremors on steroids with Perforos, God of the Forge, but he can also, fire breathing all of your team, so you can do lots of combat and attack with that. And then you've got Perforos Bronze Blooded, which is a sneak attack in the hand, a sneak attack on a stick rather, so you just bringing in big dudes if you can't pay them. Given that we've got Perforos and Kinnan in the deck, it might make sense to include some big top-end cards, so maybe some big Eldrazi or something like that you would want to get value out of. Yeah, I think those would be more than fine. Golos Tireless Pilgrim, so I've included him purely because of the fact that you can get any specific land. So if you go, excuse me, if you go and find Golos and have him find the World Tree, that's just a way to win at that point. Golos then becomes a tutor for your win condition, overall. Sylvan Scrying, Hour of Promise, Crop Rotation, Expedition Map, all of these cards are just great for getting your World Tree, but you could also do things like use it to go and get Guy's Cradle or Field of the Dead if you wanted to build Field of the Dead and Valakut. Those are both more than viable, I think, in this kind of deck. Particularly if you're going to be doing things like running Dryad of the Elysian Grove. You've got some sort of redundant sort of backups for that. Altar of the Pantheon is pretty rubbish in most decks, but if you're running gods, I think it's pretty good as far as having an altar in the deck, because it gives you a little bit more sustain and it increases your devotion, which is absolutely awesome to get those creatures online. Chromatic Lantern, obviously more mana fixing as well. So this is really all I've added as far as what the deck could look like at this point. But as I mentioned, there's also the opportunity that you could build this as an Enchantress deck. All of your Enchantress cards, none of them are legendary, but essentially having a whole bunch of enchantment gods and just regular enchantments on the field, you can do things and ramp very, very quickly with the commander himself. And the idea would be that you would essentially move your commander to, hang on, where we go? Yeah, so you get your commander to help you ramp, and then once you're at the point where you can, either flicker and or bounce and play the Prismatic Bridge, after you've taken all of the small creatures out of your deck, you can then start to have those haymakers coming in every turn. So whether it's planeswalkers, whether it's just big creatures, you can just basically set it up that way. I guess the other way that you could look at building this commander is really if you wanted to do like a bit of a janky combo deck where you only have one creature or planeswalker or very few creatures and planeswalkers in the deck. So you could look at building it purely as artifacts or vehicles or anything like that. And essentially have the Prismatic Bridge coming out as a haymaker tutor for your win condition. So whether that's an Eldrazi or whether that's a Godo to take infinite turns or something like that. There's lots of different combos that you can do with this coming out if you build your deck as a build around. You could argue that it's kind of a cheat to go and get your Maelstrom Wanderer or something like that. So you use Prismatic Bridge. There's no other creatures in the deck. The Prismatic Bridge goes to get Maelstrom Wanderer, and then from there you have a whole bunch of different Maelstrom Wanderer lines that you can then sort of execute. So you might want to put Maelstrom Wanderer, Perforos, and I guess Risen Reef as the only three creatures in the deck, and then assuming 2 out of 3 times you're not going to get the Risen Reef as the first thing from Prismatic Bridge, you just have a whole bunch of sorceries that protect that anyway. The rest of your deck is lands, and you have the enchantment that lets you every time you landfall you create a dude, and it essentially spirals out from there. I'll put a link to that card at another time, but that is my rambling as far as Esika, God of the Tree. As I said, it's nowhere near as produced as the other videos that I'll put up, and I probably will put a full deck tech up at some point once we've seen the complete spoiler season for this card sort of executed. But thanks for checking it out, and I will see you guys soon. Up until recently, I've really only been able to play Commander in a tabletop setting, as I haven't had access to an MTGO account, which is where I really discovered Card Hoarder. I'll leave a link in the description for my affiliate code if you would like to jump on board and try their card hiring service as well. I found it really, really cost effective in brewing and trying out a whole range of different decks, as you can simply return any cards after you're done using them and build a new deck. The craziest thing about it as a tabletop player is that I had no idea that so many crazy expensive reserve list cards are less than a few dollars on MTGO, cards like Guy's Cradle, cards like Mox Diamond. Only a tick or so to hire for each of these. If you've liked any of the content that you've seen on the channel so far, I'd really appreciate a subscribe and a like on the video, and any share is more than appreciated.